All right, I'm back with this evil little creature, the edible ink printer, and I was just watching some videos to see if I could find some hints about smearing, because I've got one type of smear that happens on my prints pretty frequently, and I couldn't find anything about it. And then someone else said they were having trouble with the color actually dragging, like they'll print something here and the color will kind of drag and make streaks on the paper. See, I'm not even holding this so you can see it. So let's say there's a color here and it will drag and it will keep printing where it shouldn't be printing. And I think what that is if you're using an icing sheet and they're too damp and like they have too much moisture in them, it will just resist the ink. So what you want to do, this one person had a tip, because I don't use icing sheets too much, so I'm not completely familiar with those. But they said if you warm the icing sheet up on a heating pad or a little heating tray or something, before you use it, it'll dry it out a little bit and it'll make it absorb the ink faster. So if you're having trouble printing something and then the ink kind of drags and makes streaks across the rest of the print, try that and see if that happens. That does not happen to me too often. What I get is right at the very beginning of the print. See these little marks here? And the printer's just turning itself on and kind of setting itself up right now. I get like these little black marks right at the very beginning, and they seem to be, I don't know how close I can get this and still keep it focused. They're kind of horizontal. So I think what happened is that the black ink will come out of the cartridge too much or too fast and it'll kind of pool underneath it. And as the cartridge goes back and forth as it prints, it's just dragging the black ink along. Then by the time it gets down to about a ½ inch into the print, it's kind of used up all the extra that's sitting there. And it happened again on this one. Oh, I hate this camera. I can never tell where I'm going. Okay, you see there's like this little black mark right up here. And this happened after I had cleaned it off and started printing this side. And I got a little bit of it here. It doesn't happen all the time. Of course, usually only on the light color prints that I need to do. So I was going to show you what I'm talking about here. When this comes back, and depending on what kind of printer you have, the cartridges are going to be different. But when I remove this, underneath here, the cartridge can kind of pool up and there can be some black pulled up here, or it might have come out too fast and there's some down inside it. I don't know. So it's kind of a mystery. I looked to see if there's a way you can clean it out. You can take all of these out and take a paper towel and just kind of wipe off where they sit. But you don't want to go in and mess up, you don't want to mess around inside the printer too much where the ink's coming out, because then you're going to end up having something clog and it won't print at all. Because that's what they do. And my comment on all these other videos on YouTube that I found were that it makes this look so easy. And I want everyone to think back 5 or 6 years to the Cricut cake cutter, where everyone was supposed to be able to suddenly cut all these fabulous shapes out with their Cricut, and everyone went and bought a Cricut, and then everybody is throwing the Cricuts out the window because they're terrible and it takes a long time to learn how to do it and they're unpredictable, and forget it. Now, take that same experience where people are saying, oh, these printers are so easy. They're not. They work fine until they don't, and then it takes a long time to figure out what they're doing wrong. So I'm just going to print one more and see if we get the streaks. The problem with wafer paper is you can't heat up the wafer paper because there's no moisture in it to begin with, to speak of. And I think that this problem is something different than having the ink just not being absorbed. Because if it's not being absorbed and it's dragged on the icing sheet, then you are going to get the kind of vertical streaks. This is a horizontal streak right at the beginning, so I think it's just kind of waste ink that's kind of hanging around and gets wiped off. And one good way to get rid of that is to use the longer wafer paper sheets. I showed you there were 2 lengths that you can get. And the type that I just bought from a different supplier than I usually use is longer. So if I get a little bit of ink at the beginning, I can just cut that off, and it doesn't affect the length of the print at all, which is good. Oh, let's see. I just really need to print the first part of it to see if it streaks. And I did go in and clean off that cartridge to begin with, and it seemed to help a little bit. It doesn't happen all the time, like I said, but it's a pain. Oh, and also this morning I got 2 more error messages that I didn't get yesterday. One was the port is in use, and when it says that on your printing, on the computer when you tell it to print and it gives you the error messages. It says the port is in use. That means the computer is not going to respond to you at all because something is telling it that something's already using it. All right, I'm just going to stop this because I don't need to print the whole sheet. Yeah, see, I got the same thing. See this little black mark here? I think that's just excess ink, and there's not a whole lot you can do about it. So once the excess ink is absorbed and kind of rubbed off at that point in the printing, it doesn't continue on usually. I've never had big blotchy marks in the middle of the sheet. It's always right at the very top edge. So if that happens, there's not a lot you can do. Just kind of plan for it. Don't print anything major on the very edges of the paper. A lot of times when you print these, it does leave kind of a white border around anyway. But just be aware that that can happen, and it's not an uncommon thing to happen. It happens a lot when I'm printing, especially when you're printing something that's a full color sheet like this, and it takes a lot of ink. It might just be that there's so much ink coming out, then it kind of puts out a little bit too much. So just be aware of that. What else was I going to tell you about? Oh, the port in use thing. Yeah, just don't be fooled. When you see these, don't get all excited and say, oh boy, I'm going to go get an edible ink printer because it's going to be so much fun. You just have to be ready to work with it. Oh, and if you get a paper jam, I was thinking about this today. If you get a paper jam, you know, like in a regular printer, like sometimes when you print something, it'll spit it out. It does this. Here it comes, it's done. And it stops printing. And then it starts to suck it back into the machine. And you're like, no, no, no. So if that happens, just let it go. Don't yank on it, because if you grab it and pull it, it's going to rip the wafer paper or the icing sheet, and you don't know what's going to happen. So let it suck it back in the little 1/2 inch, and then you can very gently kind of pull it back out. But if you do get a piece of wafer paper stuck inside this thing, you're going to have to open the whole thing up. You might have to take the printer head out. If you can see where it is, that's great. There is a door, like I said, on the very back of the printer where you can open that up, and sometimes you can see better where it is. A lot of times you can just get it out by printing something else, but if it won't print because it's saying that there's a paper jam and there's like a little sliver of paper in there, then you're going to have to take the whole thing and open it up. And that you can use your printer's manual to do, because every printer is going to be different. And if I show you this one, it might not necessarily help. And the last tip that I had, if you are using a printer sheet and it stops printing like 1/2 inch before the edge, what's happening is the printer is reading that the edge is coming, and it just stops printing. It makes the decision that that's where the end is going to be. So what you should do is take an extra piece of paper and kind of tape it to the back of your printer sheet so that you've got this extra edge. So this is the one you're printing on, and this is just there as a decoy. So tape this to the back of your icing sheet and run it through the normal way. And when it comes down to print that, the printer won't read this as the end. It'll say that the end is here, and it will print the full image. So if you're getting pictures that are cut off, just at the very end, try that and see if that works. And I can't think of anything else. If you think of any questions, if you have any questions, please let me know. I could do a series on, designing to print in there, but that's more of a photo editing thing. So I use Photoshop to edit my pictures. If you're an Icing Images customer, they have software that you can use, any kind of photo editing software that you can format to print, that size. But like I said, when you print the paper, it asks you what size paper do you want to use. And I could do a full sheet design and then tell it to print wallet size, and it'll do that. So there are things that you can do and things that you can't do, and depending on what Windows you have, like Windows 10 has a different print interface than Windows 8 did, and that's a huge mess because you have to figure all that out. But it's definitely something that is useful if you use it a lot. If you're not going to use this a lot, don't get one. It's not worth the aggravation, I promise you. So leave me any questions and I will answer them as soon as I can. And if you think of any problems that you've had with a printer that I have not mentioned, please post it, and I'll see if it kind of rings a bell with me, because I might be able to address that too.